Hi, I'm James Dean Vogel of the Bioprocess Institute, and this is Between Two Ferals. Today, our guest is Trayce Slumsky from Vulcan Bioworks. He's here to tell us some exciting things about their product, Vulcan Forge. Trayce is a chemical engineer and has worked for a long time in the bioprocess industry, and he's going to share some of his experiences and how this innovative product is going to help you to get your job done. Welcome, Trayce.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Glad you could stop by. I know you got a busy schedule, and we'll hopefully have a good discussion and then see where things go with this. Okay. So we met at the BPSA Summit in July, and I know you're quite busy there. And we're really excited to talk about Vulcan Forge because I think it is an innovative product that is something that's changing the industry, and then hopefully can go further. So maybe just give us a little bit about your company and then what Vulcan Forge is.
Yeah, great. So, we started Vulcan Bioworks a few years ago, sort of towards the end of the pandemic, and really originally just kind of had the idea of creating another small single-use company, perhaps getting a clean room, but watching the fast drop-off following the pandemic and demand for single use, we realized we were going to have to sort of reinvent ourselves. So part of that reinvention was the creation of the Forge. So a lot of the work that we do, we work with a lot of advanced therapy companies and things of that nature, but we wanted a better way to engage with the industry. And one of the things that occurred to us is we had seen folks who had tried to create a single-use configurator before, and it seemed like a great industry for it. It seemed like the type of industry that would really benefit from such a tool, but those tools hadn't been, in our opinion, as successful as they could have been.
And this isn't like AutoCAD or SolidWorks, right? I mean, this is something a little different.
Yeah, so it's a configurator, as we say, and so like from the starting with SolidWorks on one end of the gamut, and then maybe the configurator that you would use to build a laptop or whatever. I think this sort of sits in between, in the middle there. So it is more, it's designed. We often try to use the term at Vulcan Bioworks a lot, a fit for purpose tool.
Okay.
Right. So it's not CAD. You can't go in and change these things to the millimeter and adjust dimensions. But what we have done is taken a library of single-use components and made them available so that you can click and drag and create your own single-use assembly.
Okay, so it's more or less like Legos that go together.
Exactly.
In there, and then you have the actual part, let's say a CPC connector or a Pendotech pressure sensor. You have the actual ones there.
Yeah, we've reached already a lot of partnerships and agreements with different companies where they'll actually provide us their native CAD, sort of a dumbed down version. You can't recreate the parts from it or anything, but it's actually true to life. Everything's to scale. We're using the CAD that they provide, so it looks right in the scene. There's other folks who haven't yet engaged with us yet, and so we can create sort of generic CAD for their things and use, you can still build from publicly available data. You can also write in notes to say, hey, you may not be familiar with this filter yet, but I've got the information right here, and you can write in notes and say, hey, use this filter instead of the one that you already have.
Okay, so if I have a 10-inch filter from brand X or whatever, and it's not in the database, I could annotate it to say that.
Yeah, we've even added what we call the black box. So certain things that perhaps, and this is where we've done a lot of fun things in my career, they don't even exist yet. And so you can create a black box and then type in a description of, hey, I really want this to be some sort of curly cube mixer or something that you've never seen before, and then we can work, that's some of the other work that Vulcan Bioworks does, we can perhaps try and make that dream a reality.
Okay, all right, very, very good. So I think from my side, like you said, there have been some configurators, but traditionally it's been, I'll just use the older euphemism, it's been the back of an envelope. Right? A salesperson would come by, you would say, I need something to go basically 3 feet long with this connector, a Y, a sample bag, et cetera, and come up. And then he or she would draw that out on a piece of paper on a pad, and then it would go to somebody that would quote it, or I'd get a CAD drawing in a few months or something like that, let alone to actually get it to me. So maybe you could guide us through or give us an example of how you're way ahead of that curve and you can do this in hours, not a few months.
So I started my career as a third shift supervisor. So not only did I not have the Forge, they didn't even give me CAD. So I was very familiar with drawing those things on the back of a cocktail napkin or whatever else the case may be. And then I would pass it on to one of our engineers, who would pass it on to the procurement guy, who would pass it on to the salesperson from the single-use company, who would pass it on to their engineer. Each step of that process, we were translating and retranslating, just tons of opportunity for error. So if you look at our tool within the Vulcan Forge, you can just go in and create a new assembly, and then all of the components are arranged on the left hand. There's a series of what we hope are very intuitive menus that people have helped us try and make more and more intuitive. This is a very much a living document. It definitely changes the more and more people we get involved with the project.
So if I'm looking for something like an aseptic 3/8 or something, I could get that as opposed to an aseptic 1/4 inch. And then I would have Saint-Gobain tubing or Advanapure tubing or whoever's tubing I could put onto that and so on.
Yeah, all of the components start in one of 6 categories, and then we have subcategories. So an example of a category may be a connector. A subcategory would be an aseptic connector. Then we get to the definition and description of the components. So the description would be a 3/8 inch hose barb aseptic connector. And so that could be a Presto or an Aseptic Quick or a Ready-Mate or any of those other components. But once you have that level of that description, you can drag it into the seam, because it's functionally equivalent to some of the other options. At that point, you can build out a single-use assembly from unspecified components, or you can click specify and say, hey, I want this 3/8 inch hose barb to be a Aseptic Quick G, AQG 7006, or whatever the part numbers are. So yeah, you can design at either level, even specifying some parts and not specifying all.
Okay, very good, very good. And then is there an opportunity, or how do you know you get the right sizes? I'm thinking about reducers and T's and size on size or efficiencies in that way.
Yeah, so one of the fun things that we've been able to do is we've actually color-coded all of the hose barbs and all of the tubing sizes. So, they'll have the same size or the same color dot. So 3/8 inch hose barb will have a green dot on it. 3/8 inch ID tubing will have a green dot on it. When you match those two up, the two dots disappear. So if you're trying to make a closed system, you shouldn't have any dots left over at the end. So it's a nice kind of
and if you had a mismatch, the dots would stay.
Yeah, won't let you connect them.
Okay.
And then we can, for some folks, we have, I don't recommend it, but these rules are customizable. So if you wanted to shove, 3/8 inch tubing on a 1/2 inch hose bar, we could change the rules for you, but generally it's set up to be pretty intuitive. And it really helps kind of speed the process along in creating those designs more quickly.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. How does one get the software? How does this work? Obviously, your company needs to, be a business and thrive for that. So how does this work?
So as we were talking about, we try to gather a lot of feedback from the industry in terms of why these configurator systems hadn't been successful in the past. The two main things that came up with us are, one, they were proprietary, right? Like Company A's configurator was great as long as you only wanted to use Company A's product.
Yeah, and let's face it, they would like to steer you toward their products only if they could. But what we've learned in single use is, it's brand X is selling brand Y's components because not everything can be single source.
Yeah, exactly. And so we wanted to make sure that what we created was neutral, and so that you could use a Colder Aseptic Quick right next to a GE. Anything you wanted to do, you could do that. The second thing was getting the tool in the right hands. So one of the recurring themes that we heard from people was that, hey, these configurators live on the iPads of salespeople, which if you're going to have one place, that's a really good place to have it, right? But like I said, I couldn't get to these tools. I couldn't design with them.
Because you run the third shift, the salesperson's not going to visit you on the third shift.
Unfortunately, no. Very rarely. Some of the good ones did.
Yeah.
But yes, so what we did was we wanted to create something that was neutral, which we did, and free to use online. So anybody can go to vulcanbioworks.com, log on, say design now, and start creating assemblies. You have some limited functionality there, so you can still export that assembly and send it to a supplier who's also using the tool, like our friend Milena at Refined Sciences. So you can go on for free, design a single-use assembly, and then send that file to Milena, and then she can instantaneously generate a spec print and quote it for you. Where we do make our money and where we are trying to create a business is then if you use the tool and hopefully like it, then you can sign up for a license, and then with that license you'll be able to save all your drawings, and then do some other kind of really cool comparative analysis that we've built as well.
And I think that's key. So then a company like Refined Sciences, if I sent them that free version thing, they can pretty much in real time get me a bill of materials and a quote, and so on. So you had an example at the summit, right, where you did that, right?
So as you know, the BPSA Summit's very busy, but yeah, actually in between meetings during the breaks, we had a customer who was using the tool call us with a design, and they really needed it urgently. And so we were able to just take their file, email it to a couple of the suppliers that were using the software, and they were able to actually instantaneously. So I think the request came in on the Tuesday during the summit, and we had valid proposals for them on the Wednesday. And that was only because I was in meetings. We probably could have had them same day.
Right. But that's something where, like I said, historically that's been many weeks usually to pull that off.
We had a project that we were supporting some folks on recently. It took 88 days to get one single drawing with the right components, with the right data involved. And like I said, when you're designing it for yourself, you can drag it in aseptic quick because it's all automated, and that translation to in this case, one of the things we did is the supplier had changed all of the connectors to different connectors, and so there is no opportunity to do that if you're just directly digitally translating.
Great. One thing I'd really like to hear about is the single-use genome, and kind of there. It sounds big. Sounds like something that's gonna be exciting.
We hope so, and it's really kind of cool because it's a collaborative effort. So I mentioned before that sort of tortuous path of information where it had to go from the guy sketching on a napkin all the way through all those systems. That's really the problem that we're trying to attack. And so when we showed this, now that we've tried and get everybody speaking the same language, when we started showing this to end users, we actually got a surprising bit of negative feedback, which was that, hey, this makes it too easy to create a new design. We actually have thousands and thousands of designs already. We actually want to harmonize. We want to go to some sort of standards. You're going to give us this tool that's going to make it too easy for our engineers to differentiate and create many more designs. That's actually not progress for us. So we started thinking about it, and to create those intuitive menus, we had to create a neutral taxonomy, as I mentioned, with the categories and subcategories. So it's like you would classify the animal kingdom. And so, we classified that, aseptic quick connector as a 3/8-inch hose barb aseptic connector. It exists on all 4 levels of that taxonomy. And so we can actually, each one of those components has a digital fingerprint. We can kind of coalesce those and bring them all together and create a genome for that single-use assembly.
Okay.
We can then compare that to all of the other previously approved assemblies that you have and assign a relevance score and see how similar that it is. And therefore, if you have a 200-liter bag with 3 outlets and another 200-liter bag with 3 outlets, they'll probably have like a 97% interchangeability score.
Right.
And that's great because it can do that. Because it looks at different levels of the taxonomy, it can tell you that 2 assemblies are very similar, even if they have no components, right? So if you're using different connectors, different tubing, different bags, it still recognizes those bags as bags, that tubing as tubing, and it says, hey, these 2 aseptic connectors, though they're different, they're much more similar to each other than an aseptic connector and a 10-inch filter. So it will show you that these designs are functionally the same, and thus, our joke is, how can we bring the industry toward its goal of standards and single-use design? And our sort of quirky response is by allowing limitless customization. So what will happen is design whatever you want. All of these efforts that we've seen kind of be unsuccessful, they start with the end in mind. Here's the standard, now everybody use it. Well, it turns out people don't want to change their processes to accommodate.
Yep.
So we'll let them design whatever they want and then show them what's already available, and you sort of gravitationally pulled towards standards that way.
Well, I think, this is something that, we've been involved with single use, I'm going to say almost at the beginning, and we saw this happen. We had one end user where they had redundant supply for every one of their assemblies. And the effort was monumental. And so they had to approve all those part numbers, drawings, et cetera. And then when a change came into the system, it just created a lot of job security for us in those days, but it really showed. And then after X number of years, they realized it was not sustainable and not something to go. And I've always said, you know, if you look at things like extension cords, you know, the simplest things, you know, where you have, you know, let's just say 2 connectors and a piece of tubing. If I have a 4-foot section, a 3-foot, or a 6-foot, maybe I only stock the 6-foot and it can meet everything, and it's going to save me in other ways to do that. Home Depot does that. Now, if I need a 3.5-foot piece that's so custom that I can't run, then your tool can help us do that. And I think that's really where this is. And I'll just use my other thing. We just had the BPE meeting last week, and we were starting to say this because some things are shaking out, like there are leaders in certain classes, let's say an aseptic connector, where there were many more years ago, it's some of these things is going out, and maybe a certain brand of connector will be the tri-clamp of the future for aseptic connectors. We already see it with lures and other things like that.
Yeah.
And I think your software can help us see that clearer.
Yeah.
And then help people make not only technical decisions, but even business decisions for supply chain and how to really address that.
Yeah. One of the, you may have seen the interchangeability paper that came out from BPOG recently. And so one of the functionality that we're working to develop right now is actually a full interchangeability assessment. So for this, what we are able to do is actually, per the guidelines on the paper of evaluating like for like and functionally equivalent, we can take any assembly, look at the rest of the component library and say, hey, we do have like for like replacements for these components, and therefore your interchangeability score is X. And so it can give you an idea of you know, how firm your supply chain is. Are you relying, and sometimes there's very good reasons to rely on very unique technology, but it'll allow you to assess that in real time, again, with just a click of the mouse, rather than you know, what's been done in the past, which is very painful Excel exercises.
I think, you know, BPE is trying to look at this, and I'll just say I still think we're a phase out for this, because even interchangeability with a platinum cured silicone from brand X to brand Y, not every end user will be able to do it. Now, maybe in a certain part of the process, buffer preparation, something like that. But I think, you know, fill finish, cell therapy, I'm not quite sure we're ready yet to get there. I think we will, and we have to get there. But I still think the industry overall is still bucking that trend to some degree.
Yeah, and we're trying to play our position here. So we know there's still a lot of things that have to happen for this to be a really robust, mature process for the industry. But, you know, the folks that can do that kind of assessment, they say, hey, well, there's no real digital tools for us to look at this message. So we'll bring the digital tools, and they can bring the, you know, criticality assessments and say, hey, this is buffer prep, or this is final fill. And so we'll only, you know, tolerate these kinds of changes. But we'll give them a digital tool. You know, another phrase we like to use a lot is an American sports analogy, but we want to start people on third base, right? So that they only have a short distance left to go to accomplish their goals.
I think it can definitely do that. One other thing I think with the scalability is, right, the more companies you get into this, right, your library builds.
Yeah, I mean, that's been great. So what we do is when we have a partner who wants to come to us for what we call an enterprise license and bring their component libraries and their drawing libraries into the Forge, they have the option, so when it comes to the component data, to say, hey, we want to keep this to ourselves, or hey, you can feed it to the public-facing tool. And I thought it'd be like 50-50, but it's been 95-5. Almost everybody who engages with us in the tool is like, hey, yeah, let's put this data out there so that other people can use it. And so when that happens, you know, if we were trying to gather the biocompatibility data for all of the tubing, there's 1,000 pharmaceutical companies and 1,000 suppliers out there all trying to do that. 2,000 times they're trying to aggregate that data. If we do it once here, and the people make it available to the other folks, then we only have to do that once. We can focus on other things that are more important. During the talk that I led at the BPSA summit, you know, one of our colleagues said something that I've been repeating over and over again. He said, today, single-use design is 90% back and forth communication and 10% rigor. What we need to do is move it to 90% rigor and 10% back and forth communication.
Yep. It's funny, or not funny, but good thing you brought up. So with those things like extractables data or qualification packages, does your software have a way to reference that, or is that something in the future?
So it does. I mean, so not a lot of people are sharing their extractables data with us, which is fine, but it's really the system doesn't know the difference between extractables data and biocompatibility,
or
which we do
dimensional tolerances or something like that.
So this, we just often refer to it as metadata, right? It's just all of the data that you can ascribe to a particular component. So anything that people can build in, then it can be assessed via that data. So we have people who are saying like, hey, these are the components we'll support in our sterility program. So that exists as a data field that's associated with that component. And so they can filter for the components that they do and do not support sterility claims for.
Excellent. What advice would you give a young engineer coming into the field now? Single use is pretty exciting, and you know, you've been here, you've been on manufacturing floor, and I always like to bring something back to the younger people coming into the space. Many of them see the attractiveness of biopharmaceuticals and single use technologies. What is there anything key to your career or something you would share with them?
Yeah, I think, you know, make your own decisions. Really go out there. I think for the longest time, and I started in this place, right? The people had these standards that they used, but they weren't, again, to our Vulcan phrase, fit for purpose, right? So we were taking, you know, a 5 ml sample in a 250 ml bag, and you could barely tell if the fluid was in there or not. It's not that bad, right? Like to make these custom things, it's not that hard. What we do in trying to help make medicine, what I was doing in my first jobs, is it's far more complicated than making these plastic
oh my Lord, yeah.
tools. And the benefit of making those fit for purpose tools, because of the high cost of these medicines, is transformative, right? If you can be more efficient, if you can throw away less drug product, if you can throw away less drug substance, you know, so really let your imagination run wild. And if you use the Forge, we can help turn those solutions, or those ideas, into solutions very quickly.
Very good, very good. Do you think this is the year that the Bills are going to do it? Their stadium's leaving us this year, right? They're getting a new one.
Ralph Wilson Stadium, which it will forever be known as, it's going to go out with a bang this year.
All right.
Finally, I'm getting goosebumps even thinking about it.
Good.
Josh Allen is a monster.
Well,
he
we
won't
saw
be denied.
when we filmed this the day before, I think he broke his nose and came back.
Right back in the game.
Yep.
Bleeding from the nose, went right back in the game. He's incredible. He's incredible.
Okay.
Go Bills.
All right. So I wish that. Well, again, thank you very much for being here. Vulcan Forge is an exciting product. Please look at the website. You'll get all the info at the end of the podcast here. Call Trayce and see what you can do with it. Really exciting product. So look forward to that. Well, thank you.
Thanks.